very much. Farewell. Enjoy retirement. Remember, retirement is not, where you go to die. Retirement is where you now have a real life. You don't have to deal with people that are unpleasant. You determine who you want to deal with. You determine what you want to do with the day, for the day. So retirement is real life. I'm very far from that, 30 or 40 years from it. So you must tell us what it's like. And you must keep in contact, send us messages. We'd like to hear from you. You must not disappear into the mist. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Sen.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chairperson. Well, I can tell you something. This is history. This is history. Ma'am Regina, you really created history, and you'll go down in the annals of history as being someone who's really been able to change hearts and minds. Because if you listen to the last speaker that stood on this podium, if you've been able to change their hearts and minds, you've done well. And I think that there's no other tribute that we can pay to you but that. But having said that, Honorable Barotto spoke about the history of the mace here, the South African mace. Let me tell you, honorable colleagues, that in medieval times, the Royal Sergeant at Arms carried a mace stamped to the Royal Arms. This was a weapon used to assert the authority of the monarch at that time. And I'm glad it's not used as a weapon today. Although if you look at the shape of our mace, it does look like a knobkiri. And I think Ma'am Regina could have used it as a knobkiri on some of us in this house, but fortunately she did not. And I thought I will say today to you, Ma'am Regina, that there are probably some colors that you don't want to see when you go home and you retire. But after that speech, I think you'll want to see that color. You'll have a soft heart, and you'll want to see red as well, because it was those clad in red that enabled you to do something that you didn't do in the past. And I'm glad that you went there with full of respect and everything else and spoke to our honorable colleagues there. But you will be able to write a book on what they told you when you went to them. We don't know what they whispered in, I futsak, I this, I that. But we didn't hear them saying that, and we know they didn't say that. But you carried out your duties as per the instruction of the chairperson and the speaker with such aplomb that they melted in your fingers. And that is the kind of sergeant at arms we need here. I think sometimes it's a misnomer to say sergeant, because sergeant means upoisa, and we know what sergeants used to do to us before 1994. And when we say sergeant at arms, it makes it even worse, because you think they are carrying arms. But Ma'am Regina, we want to, on behalf of the IFP and our leader, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who's been here as long as you have been. I was here in 94, he was here in 94, and yesterday we were talking about those that were here in that era. There's probably only 20 of us that were here. And we were very pleased to be associated with people like Ma'am Regina and and I see for the first time in history as well, this is history in the making today, that all the colleagues who do the backroom work, the parliamentary staff and support, are seated out there giving support to Ma'am Regina. And thank you to all of you for the backroom work, for the support that you give us, for the nonsense that you take from us as whip sometimes. Why this speaker? Why not that speaker? You gave us short time, chairperson. Check the clock again. I think. So
we were expecting, and there was scheduled that Deputy President David Mabuza would be answering questions in Parliament. Of course, he cannot do that. And
we can recognize all of them that are there and some who are not there. But I think there's another practice that Ma'am Regina started a few years ago, and that was to go to the gym, because she needed to have the muscles to do what she was being instructed, sometimes by you, Ma'am Barotto. She had to have the muscles, so continue gymming. It'll keep you healthy. And do not forget us here in Parliament. Pop in, we'll recognize you seated up there and say, hey, there's one of our former colleagues and friends. So good luck to you and your family, and enjoy the rest of the time with your family. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Singh. I heard every part of your speech, Honorable Singh, all the words that you uttered except one. Thank you very much. Yerbare Melder.
Honourable Chairperson, it's an honour and a privilege for me on behalf of the Freedom Front Plus to associate ourselves with the motion on the order paper today, where we are taking leave of our Sergeant at Arms. I met the Honourable Sergeant at Arms, Regina Mshlomi, when she came here in 1996, and quite often saw her in the corridors, obviously, and within the house. And as was correctly pointed out, she's been serving as Sergeant at Arms for the last 8 years, the first woman to be appointed in that role, and always she did her job with huge dignity and huge regard for the procedures of the House. It is a duty of the Sergeant at Arms to escort the presiding officer into the chamber, which he did, and the President and other dignitaries during SONA, and to assist the presiding officer to maintain order in the House. And that is one thing I think our colleague Regina did not always like to do, because under the instructions of the Speaker, she from time to time, in terms of Rule 61, had to act to remove members from the House. And if you look at Rule 57(3)(a) and B, those who disrupt the proceedings had to be told to leave the House. Now, the Honourable Paulson just now indicated that there was no other choice, and that they were forced to do so for history's sake, and that's why they did what they did, and Mr. Regina Mshlomi played her role. However, our colleagues from the EFF made one vital mistake. They didn't realize that Regina also has some friends with white shirts. So they took her a bit lightly. They thought they could handle Regina, but Regina's got some friends. And those friends did what they needed to do, and that's also part of history, and we all know the history as from there. Honourable colleagues, it's always sad when a colleague leaves us. That time happens, and Regina is doing so today. And I can only speak from my own experience. I remember that I have not on one occasion met Regina in all those years in the corridors of this precinct, and that she did not greet one back with a huge smile. She was always smiling, she was always in a good mood, and she always acted in that respect. My father taught me, and I think that's true for all of us, that one person at the right time and the right place can make a difference. And we all know that Regina made that difference in our institution. So, Honourable Speaker, Chairperson, on behalf of the Freedom Front Plus and on behalf of our colleagues, I want to say goodbye to Regina. She will always remain part of the family of Parliament. She will always be welcome to come back, and we wish her well in her retirement. If I may end in my home language, Regina, jy moet mooi loop, geniet jou aftrede, wees veilig, en ons sê vir jou baie, baie dankie.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Honourable Swartz.
Thank you, House Chair. House Chair, the ACDP joins other parties in paying tribute to the first female Sergeant at Arms at our South African Parliament, Ms. Regina Mshlomi. She's held this position since 2011 and has a total of 23 years in service, for which we from the ACDP sincerely honour her and we thank her. And of course, she will be best remembered for having to deal with the disruptions. And thank you, Honourable Pauser, for sharing some of the insights. I do believe that the Honourable former or present Sergeant at Arms should write a book to account all those in things, and I think that will be very interesting to read. But however, one needs to take a step back, because when she arrived in Parliament way back in 1996, one of her first responsibilities was to resolve ill discipline at the Parliament then. And I understand that there was a lot of drinking on the job that she had to resolve, and she already at that stage became known as an enforcer of discipline in Parliament. And she also helped with the Employee Assistance Office and became very capable in maintaining decorum and protecting this ground. Now, one of the incidents was, I remember not a long time ago, I had a prayer group down here, and the Honourable Mshlomi was upstairs, and she said, "What are you doing down here?" And I invited her to come and join us down here, which she then did graciously, and we prayed for her. And then she said, "But your visitors are not allowed here," and sent them out. And that was the nature of how she would deal with us, with great friendliness, great courtesy, great firmness and professionalism. And for that, we are always grateful. And so, as the Honourable Singh pointed out, while she might hold the rank of Sergeant at Arms, in our view, she is indeed a Regina, which in Latin means a royal queen who carries the mace. So we trust that she'll be blessed in her retirement, your family, and I also want to thank all the protection services that are here supporting her as well. We honor you, we thank you for the protection, and yes, we also say we are sorry for the times that we have given you a hard time at all the different, when we come in and we question and you're looking after our baggages, you're looking after us. So we honor you, we thank each one of you. And may I then, just in conclusion, just pray a blessing upon you. And that is the Aaronic blessing. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May he lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Nkwarkwa.
House Chair, thank you very much. Dumelang bagaetso. Ka jeno re tlotla dumelisa mosadi ya sebeditseng ka thata. Mama, we are here to say thank you very much for serving us and serving this institution with distinction. Ngokuthi yonke le minyaka, you know, one of the things that struck me about how you carried yourself in this parliament, indobeko, your humility. To the point where abantu abatsha abafana nathi uba elevate ibe ngathi bangabantu abadala kunawe, ibe ungowena muntu umdala ungabonakalisi futhi nokuthi une authority onayo kule parliament sewufuna usigxotha kusini na. Indeed linyaniso emsulwa elithi bendidla ngothi xa ndiqhula ndithi ndifuna imini apho nami uzawukhundikhangela isitshomi zinikhuphe pha ngaphandle. Kodwa ke bendiye ndacela kuwe ndathi it should be you that carries me outside pha ngaphandle. But you've never done that. Probably you'll have to do it again with 7th Democratic Parliament. The other important issue, Mama, about indlela nesikhokelo sakho is that you had the unenviable task, especially in the last term, of having to evict some of us from this house here. Bakwenzisa umsebenzi obalulekileyo because khumbula ubungazuwazi amandla akho up until such time kufuneka moments ezinjalo. Thina silapha si-United Democratic Movement asimanga nje ukuthi uzuphumule kakuhle kwi-retirement. Sifuna ukuthi ushile umzila ngemva, umzila for nabanye abazawufika emveni kwakho, ngakumbi xa uphinde waba ngumama oqala oba yi-Sergeant at Arms kule National Assembly. Kufuneka siyazi ukuthi abantwana abangosisi nabanye abantu abangomama babone ukuthi le nto iyakwazi ukwenziwa yenziwe futhi ngamanye amanini apha ngaphakathi bayenze iphumelele. Kuloo ndawo sifuna ukuthi malibongwe. Ekugqibeleni xa ndiza kuhlala ndifuna ukuthi kuwe mna njengenkokheli entsha ndiyifundile intobeko kuwe. Ndiyifundile ukuthi umdala ukwazi ukumhlonipha omncinci. Ndiyifundile into yokuba umuntu uyakwazi athi emncinci athotyelwe nokuba sengathethi into eyiyo kusini na. Kuba kaloku kuloo nto into eyixabisileyo yinto ephuma emntwini. Wayedla ngokuthi umakhulu ubomhlonipha umuntu mntanam ayingowakho ngokaThixo. Ndifuna ukuthi indlela ubudila nathi ngayo ibinjalo. Uzuyonwabele ke mama i-retirement uyazi ukuthi thina eMzantsi Afrika nalapha kule ndlu yobusomthetho siyakuthanda. Camagu.
Siyabulela mhlonishwa. Honorable Ntaisa.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Let us as the AIC join other parties in paying tribute and bid farewell to one of our own, a woman that has served the Parliament to the best of her satisfaction. We appreciate the work that Mamu Regina has done for the Parliament. Sometimes being a Sergeant at Arms cannot be an easy job, because sometimes they're expected not to use your power. So it is not easy. We have learned a lot, and with pride, that means Mhlom is coming very far. So your contribution to the country did not start from being just a Sergeant at Arms in Parliament. but you're also a teacher of English and commercial subjects. We also believe that you must have taught some of the women to become business women, because teaching commercial subjects would make some of women to end up being the business women. So that is a great job indeed. It is a great honor for you to be the first woman Sergeant at Arms in National Assembly to lead the President. It is now time that you should reflect on the good that you have done for the country. As AIC, wish you all the best. So I remember just this morning, I spoke to your Mamu Regina, saying that now what do you want to live so ill? Then you said you don't want to go home in a position that you can't even speak or say anything to your child because of old age. Then you want to go home when you can still see. So thank you very much for the work that you have done. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable the Chief Whip of the Opposition.
Thank you, House Chairperson. On the 15th of February 2011, Ms. Regina Mahlomi was announced as the appointed Sergeant at Arms of the National Assembly, with her effect of the appointment taking place on the 10th of February 2011. The first female Sergeant at Arms in the Parliament of South Africa. Malibongwe. Halala, Mam Regina, halala. Mam Regina has been tasked with the maintenance of the attendance register of the Members of Parliament for roughly 8 years now. She has also been responsible for a very important job, which is maintaining the discipline in the House. Not only the discipline amongst members, but little did we know that Mam Regina was also in charge of making sure that no strangers ever stepped foot on the hallowed floors of Parliament. I thought that her job just meant the sacred ground on which MPs walk, but upon reflection, it turned out that in the public gallery, Mam Regina also had to make sure that any of our guests that came in also behaved themselves. So when Mam Regina first came in, I couldn't help but notice I was 6'2", and Mam Regina was a little bit smaller than I was. And I thought, I wonder what would happen if I ever needed to be ejected from the House. And I soon realized when I felt the weight of the mace that I would never mess with Mam Regina, because anyone who could carry the mace was definitely someone who visited the gym regularly. We have seen our Sergeant at Arms carry this mace many times, but I don't think any of us have ever appreciated the symbolism of her carrying the mace into the House, and the significance behind the fact of the tradition, because the mace symbolizes that the House is formally in session and that the proceedings that then continue are in fact official. The mace that Mam Regina has carried for all of these years is 1.196 meters long, and it weighs a whopping 9.86 kilograms. At the head of the mace is an 18-karat gold drum covered in springbok skin. The skin is attached to the drum by 18 buttons made of minerals and gemstones from South Africa. A book made of gold is atop of the drum, which has a raised text that contains an extract from the preamble to our Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. The mace reflects the history, tradition, diversity, and cultures of the people of South Africa. And indeed, our Sergeant at Arms has reflected so much of the diversity of South Africa. As I said, I have never personally been asked to leave the House by Mam Regina because I'm very well behaved. But those who have been asked to leave will attest to the fact that Mam Regina has always spoken to them in their mother tongue. And I think that it shows a great deal of respect and kindness that someone has taken the effort to learn what language you speak, so in a difficult time of confrontation, it's done in your mother tongue. Having served Parliament with distinction, patriotism, bravery, we now congratulate Mam Regina on her retirement. We wish her nothing but health and happiness, time well spent with her family and friends, relaxation and rest, and mostly a break from all of us MPs. May your retirement be long and happy. It is most well deserved. On behalf of the Democratic Alliance, we thank you most sincerely for your service and wish you nothing but the best for this new chapter in your life. May I end by saying this. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face and rains fall soft upon your fields. May God hold you in the palm of your hand. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chief Whip of the Opposition. Honorable members, that concludes the debate. I now put the motion. Are there any objections? The motion is therefore agreed to. Thank you very much, honorable members. The presiding officers associate themselves with the motion. Re a leboha haholo mme. Fela re kopa rona o kgutle. Thank you very much. You know, it is such motions which save a lot of my black hair. Thank you very much, honorable members. Now the business begins. The secretary will read the first order of the day.
Consideration of report of Portfolio Committee on Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development on oversight visit to KwaZulu-Natal province from 26 to 30 August 2019.
The Honorable ZMD Mandela.
Thank you, House Chair. Honorable members, I would like to preface the tabling of this report with 3 brief remarks focusing on the dynamic of oversight, advancing participatory democracy, and pertinent lessons from this oversight visit. Honorable Chairperson, the health of our democracy depends on the health of all its constituent organs, public or social sector, parliament and the executive, and the state or the administration. These sectors each have their own organs that further enable functionality and the delivery of their mandate. Parliament, through the Portfolio Committee, extends its mandate of holding the executive and the administration accountable. Oversight provides the Portfolio Committee the opportunity to experience firsthand the conditions of our people and the state of service delivery. Through providing access to individuals, communities, and community structures, the oversight visit gave expression to participatory democracy. The reality on the ground is harsh, and our people are really suffering. In listening to our people on the ground during this oversight visit, we realized that the experience that they have emanate from 3 primary problems: the lack of access to information about government programs, the lack of capacity of government departments to effectively implement, and the lack of coordination between government departments. I may also add to this contending or competing community factions for limited government resources. Hence, it is important to ensure that CPAs are run effectively and democratically for the benefit of all its beneficiaries. These issues we need to address in all earnestness if we are to deliver on our mandate and make a difference in building a better life for all our people. The report that we are tabling contains some disturbing findings, but please allow me, Honorable Chairperson, to highlight 2 or 3 of these issues. Firstly, let me say that the agricultural sector is closely related to our goals of fighting poverty, inequality, and ensuring food security for our poor rural communities. It is therefore vital that the transformation of this sector be accorded the priority that it deserves. Some statistics reflect that as much as 80% of agricultural land in Africa emanates from small farmers, and hence the critical demand of empower more of our historically disadvantaged to start their own self-sufficient and commercial farming, and they grow their participation in the agricultural sector. This must be a top priority, especially for the deep rural communities, for whom poverty is a reality that they stare in the face of on a daily basis, and by so doing, we are then able to advance our agrarian revolution program and dismantling agricultural monopolies. Secondly, we must rethink the way in which we approach the land reform, and I want to cite an example of the case we encountered on this visit. One of the beneficiaries of our 1 hectare, 1 household initiatives, who stays so far from his allocated land that is almost self-defeating. We must ensure that beneficiaries of land reform and related programs are enabled to make a success of their endeavors. The manner in which we are allocating financial resources, land, and agricultural infrastructure must be done conveniently in order to ensure the productivity of the enterprises. Thirdly, the last issue I want to highlight relates to poverty and rural development. We cannot, after 25 years into democracy, still perpetuate special developmental paradigm that operates like our separate development schemes of apartheid. The rural-urban divide, resource allocation, and access to enabling support programs are mountains that rural communities and individuals have to scale. We must do more to break down this paradigm, as we are all equal before the law. Honorable Chairperson, on that note, I thank you and welcome the report of our Portfolio Committee on Agriculture, Land Reform, and Rural Development Oversight to KwaZulu-Natal Province.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I now recognize the Honorable, the Chief Whip of the Majority Party. Chief Whip.
Nkosi Esihlalo, Chair, I move that this report be adopted by the House. Thank you.
The motion is that the report be adopted. Are there any objections?
House Chair, the DA would like to make a declaration.
Noted. Any other declaration? The EFF, IFP, FF plus, ACDP. Requests for declarations of vote have been received. In terms of Rule 108, I will now allow one member of each political party wishing to make a declaration an opportunity to do so within the time allocation as determined by the Rules Committee. Namely, the ANC will have 7 minutes, DA will have 5, EFF 4 minutes, and all other parties 3 minutes. The Honorable Member from the DA.
Thank you, House Chair. One of the projects visited by the committee is Amandla Entuthuko Feedlot. Loosely translated, this means the power of development feedlot. Unfortunately, what we witnessed on the ground in KZN did not showcase the power of development. All they had to show for the 3 million feedlot was a fenced field with absolutely nothing on it. Clearly no feasibility to approval of this project. In total, an amount of 437 million was spent by the two departments of Agriculture and Rural Development and Land Reform on the 18 projects, ostensibly for acquisition of land, machinery, infrastructure, and production costs. However, not all of these funds found their way to the intended purpose. For example, beneficiaries from the Empangisweni project had no knowledge of an amount of 3 million for a vegetable scheme under irrigation. The current state of most of the projects negates the astronomical amounts supposedly spent on them. One has to wonder where the money went. Extension services by the Department of Agriculture were non-existent. All the beneficiaries confirmed this. One has to again wonder what the amount of 202 million spent under the Extension Recovery Program between 2015 and 2018 was used for. Unfortunately, with a serious lack of monitoring and evaluation on funds disbursed, one may never know. Amandla entuthuko akabonakali kwaZulu. Iyaphi kanti le mali? The DA supports the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Honorable Member, take the floor.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Majority of the 19 projects that the Portfolio Committee visited in the KZN have completely collapsed. House Chair, it is not surprising that the recent report by the Auditor General has picked up KZN as one of the greatest contributors to irregular expenditure. With the experience we as the committee got during the oversight, we can bear testimony to that. For the purpose of this declaration, I would like to focus on two projects that really need urgent attention of the department. A project in Mkayakude at Makatini Flats, run by an entity of the department called Mjindi Farming Enterprise, has been supported by government since 2009 and have thus far received over R500 million. And farmers during our meeting raised a lot of dissatisfaction with the model implemented and told the committees that they have never benefited from cash injection by government and are still appealing for help from government. We proposed as the EFF that the department must look deeper into the financial affairs of Mjindi Enterprise, especially at the Makatini Flats, as it is not beneficial to farmers at all, and institute a forensic audit ASAP. Another project of Empangisweni Community Trust, chaired by Nkosi Divi Zondi of the Empangisweni Traditional Council, was formed in 2004. Beneficiaries acquired 520 hectares of land through restitution of land rights. The Commission of Restitution of Land Rights awarded restoration of rights to 300 households with 2,700 beneficiaries, 1,547 women and 1,200 youth. The department implemented the project through Agriculture Development Agency, and there are serious allegations of corruptions that were raised by the Inkosi and the community that must be followed up as a matter of urgency. And I think the member from the DA also spoke about that 3 million rand was spent on a vegetable project. There is literally nothing on the ground around that. Now, currently there are no operations as the project, there are no operations at the project site except a 70-hectare of planted orchards deteriorating on a daily basis because of no funding to the project, and a full year has passed now. 120 people who used to work at the project have lost their job now, and an initial investment by government is just going for a waste as a result of this. Clearly, this project will only start making profit after harvesting of trees in about 3 to 5 years, and in about 3 to 5 years from now. And why is there no multi-year support from government in the form of cash injection to this project, as it has continued to fund Mjindi for the past 10 years? Now, House Chair, the EFF supports the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. IFP.
Thank you, House Chairperson. The recent oversight towards Natal highlighted quite a few issues with regards to the smallholder farmers as well as the subsistence farmers. The department does not sufficiently monitor how these farmers have progressed through the assistance given to them. As such, these farmers have little ongoing support to some of the challenges they experience. These farmers do not have the luxury of large amounts of capital reserves and require near maximum efficiency regarding production. The department must ensure that it has the proper and adequate mechanisms to further support smallholder farmers. What concerns me is that the Department of Agriculture, Rural Development and Land Reform waste millions of taxpayers' money on irregular, fruitless and wasteful expenditure, not to mention cases of corruption within a government. So why is the department so intent on diverting attention to an easy scapegoat to communal-owned land under the Ngonyama Trust when it should be fixing its internal problems? The use of mentors and strategic partners have also not paid the intended dividend. We need a comprehensive report by the department of all funds spent on projects aimed at assisting farmers through mentors, strategic partners, and agencies. This will be able to provide an assessment of the progress made in capitalizing smallholder farmers. Chairperson, amalunga ahloniphekileyo lapha aseyibalule indaba yokungabikho kobulungiswa ey'sebenzini zomnyango. Konke okwenzakalayo kungenxa yokuthi iy'sebenzi zomnyango ziyinikele ekwenzeni umsebenzi ngobuqotho, zisetshenziswa nangabathile ukuthi bezizuse bona kunokuthi kusizakale isizwe. Kuphuma imali kahulumeni kuthiwa kuyosizwa abantu, kanti imali izophuma iphumele eceleni. Konke okuvelayo kuyakhomba ukuthi inkohlakalo isazoqhubekela ilizwe. Abantu abampofu kusetshenziswa igama labo kuthiwa bayasizwa, kodwa kube kusizakala ikhulu, kusizakala osopolitiki, kusizakala iy'thunywa zomnyango ey'thile ukuthi zikwazi swaxelisa iy'mali zombuso engabe yisiza abantu kodwa yisize bona abathile abambalwa kuphela. Nanxa kunjalo umuntu-ke uyaweseka umbiko ophumuleyo ngokomnyango ngoba uveza amaqiniso amaningi ngokwenza le mnyango okudinga kulandelwe yile komiti. Ngiyathokoza.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. FF plus.
Chairperson, we agree with this report, its observations and recommendations, and that this is a just depiction of what we saw in KZN. The only thing the need to highlight just a few. We spend hours and days in committee meetings and in committee rooms. We talk about projects and we see numerous reports about one thing and then the next. We are bombarded by explanations of our CUSP, Ilema Letsema, Recap, Plus, RIDP, RCDP, CPA, One Household, One Hectare, CRR, AgriParts, AVMP, RCVMP, to name but a few, are supposed to be working. And we receive beautiful reports of these projects, and we see how paper targets get met every single time. But on closer inspection, as we did with this oversight, we see that the reality on the ground tells a different story, Chairperson. A prime example of this specifically, and speaking to KZN specifically, is the Ndomo FPSU. On paper, this project is excellent. We even saw pictures to say that this was a success. But on inspection of this project, we saw that it was in total disarray. Farmers were planting cabbages, yet the farming implements that were given were to plant, harvest, clean, and pack potatoes. The access to these markets were promised, and to this day, they have not yet been realized. And this, as colleagues have mentioned, is one of the hundreds of projects that the department is currently implementing. Chair, and this is proof of the sector oversight model of this parliament that is failing, and it is failing our people. We need to add more site visits. Reports on performance information are not sufficient as oversight. Paper targets without depicting the quality of these targets will never improve our service delivery. When we come to site visits, we see that the reality is not as our paper targets and as our reports have reflected. We need more oversight, we need more opportunities like this, and we need to hold our departments more accountable for what they are doing to our people. And on a disconcerting note, Chair, if we don't go on oversights like this and we take the department along for the ride, they will most probably never get to see their own projects, and they will be misled by officials of provincial departments that lie blatantly to their faces. But Chair, as I conclude, We visited a number of border municipalities and projects, and we saw with our own eyes that the red line fencing in these border municipalities are not sufficient and are not adequate, even though the department says they are adequately maintained and they are sharp.
Thank you very
Chairperson, my
much.
fear is that what is happening in Limpopo will next be happening in KZN. But
Thank you
other
very
than that,
much, Honourable
we
Member.
support this report. Thank you.
ACDP.
Honourable Speaker, at the outset, the ACDP wishes to commend the Portfolio Committee on Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development on the compilation of this report on their oversight visit to KwaZulu-Natal. On studying the report, one finds that it is frank, transparent, and not shy of honouring the truth as it elaborates on both successes and failures. It is the view of the ACDP that this report presents a synopsis, a microcosm, a snapshot, if you like, of the challenges pertaining to the land question. The ruling party has had 25 years to bring redress to the landless, impoverished, and the indigent of our country. And if one takes this particular report as a progress on redress, then the only conclusion that one can reach is that the ruling party and those that are accountable to it has failed in this regard. Allow me to cite a few examples to substantiate. The 1 hectare, 1 household program was meant to allocate 1 hectare of land to needy households in order to reduce poverty in rural areas and revive the caliber of productive black smallholder farmers and food producers. What did the committee find? Funds for this program were allocated to commercial farmers rather than needy households. Secondly, some beneficiaries would have benefited from the recapitalization and development program and further received the 1 hectare, 1 household grant, while many poor communities waited for government support. The Amandla Tutuko Cooperative needed 3 million from the Comprehensive Agricultural Support Program for a 4-kilometer fence and a feedlot. 490,000 rand was provided for the fence with no gates at one camp. And the fence is now in need of repair because the project has been abandoned, allegedly due to competition within the mining sector. The committee made 2 telling observations. Firstly, the collapse of land reform projects can be attributed to weaker institutional mechanisms for coordinating interventions on land reform. Secondly, they said, there are no mechanisms to streamline funding of projects and ensuring that the intended beneficiaries are supported. Honorable House Chair, it is the view of the African Christian Democratic Party that these recommendations given by this particular portfolio committee is what we should be focused on and what we should be fixing rather than meddling with Section 25 of our Constitution. I thank you as the ACDP supports
Thank you
this
very
report.
much, Honourable Member. ANC.
Honorable Chair and honorable members of the August House, the ANC-led government is the only progressive government in this country. I therefore stand here to declare the support to the oversight report of KwaZulu-Natal. Honorable Chair, we are going to continue to fight for a better life for our people and be relevant to our national democratic revolution, because we have progressive policies that are meant to address historical injustice of the past. I further ensure that equality and redistribution of the country's resources will be done by this African National Congress. South African people must always remember that our struggle is not over. we have to eliminate the apartheid machinery, including the current monopoly of capital in our beloved country. Let me remind this August House that is this government of the ANC that cares about the realization of better life for all South Africans. No one else. No one else. We have the constitution that embraces socio-economic rights. Honorable Chair, as the committee, we undertook an oversight visit to the province of KwaZulu-Natal in order to track the progress that has been made by this Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. Honorable Chair, this is a clear indication that we take our work seriously. We are made to believe that this parliament passes the legislation that is meant to address economic challenges that are faced by our people, further ensure fair equality and participation in the economy of this country. The ANC is always the first to acknowledge challenges that are faced by our government. We do not shy away from them because we are committed. We are a committed government. Chair, pele 1994 iba gona Department ya Agriculture ibe dia tšhelete ntšintši ya ile re be fita batho ba ba itsebe sa fiti batho ba rena ba bola ke tala ibile ile ba seta ibile ba seta fetse ba setafatša ke mmušo wa apartheid. Chair, for us as the ANC, our most cherished concern is not with the few, but it's for the many people of this country. The process to change the horrible legacy that was there in this country. Honorable Chairperson.
Honorable members.
Good afternoon. Since the
Order, honorable members.
Honorable Chairperson, forward we go. The Agriculture Department is going to make sure that the economy of this country goes up because the African National Congress is there for it, and we are going to make sure that we provide food and security to our nation. The participation of the small farmer, emerging farmers, especially in the rural areas, is our goal as the ANC. No ways, it is our goal. In welcoming this report, Honorable Chair, we do denounce our progressive policies as the ANC and all efforts made by our department, it indeed, and we will ensure that programs that undertaken by this department becomes a successful benefit to the majority of our people in this country through cooperative development that are in farming activities to allow them to enter in the mainstream of economic in the global market. No ways that our people can be suffering when we are there. I have said that the portfolio committee says that we will also be important that the department will look into the expansion of the government extension advisory services across the provinces that we have in this country. The department must have an action plan detailing how they will resolve the challenges that we identified in all the projects that we have visited by the portfolio committee when we were in KwaZulu-Natal. In addition, Honorable Chairperson, the action plan should come
is largely unchanged since September. The inflation forecast generated by the
an exit strategy must also be in place for all the projects. Honorable Chairperson, again I declare our support for this report of the Department of Agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you very much, honorable member. Order, honorable members. I put the question again. Are there any objections to the motion? No. No objections. Motion agreed to. Order, honorable members. The secretary will read the second order.
Consideration of report of Portfolio Committee on Police on Firearms Amnesty Declaration.
The Honorable G.M. Jumat Peterson.
Honorable Chairperson, House Chair, and honorable members, the Portfolio Committee on Police approved the firearms amnesty proposed by the Minister of Police yesterday. Our committee met with over 200 community police forums chairpersons, neighborhood watchers, and police cluster commanders from throughout the Western Cape. We heard how serious crime and gang violence is ripping our communities apart, and our children are being killed by gunfire. Honorable House Chair, as a country, we cannot allow the wanton destruction caused by firearms in the hands of gangsters and other violent criminals to go unchallenged. We have made it our business as a committee to unite in the fight against crime, and we fully support the call for the firearms amnesty. We have decided to amend the dates originally proposed by the Minister of Police and suggested that the commencement date be 1st of December 2019 until the 31st of May 2020. Honorable members, the amnesty was referred to us on the 28th of August 2019 for a declaration of a firearm amnesty in terms of Section 1392A of the Firearms Control Act. The Portfolio Committee met on the 11th of September 2019 and again on the 23rd of October to finally approve the firearms amnesty request. We have confidence that the amnesty will yield the necessary results in the delivery of illegal firearms and unwanted firearms. We know that 32,000 firearms and 348,000 rounds of ammunition were recovered and surrendered during the previous firearm amnesty during the period in 2010. Honorable members, our committee raised concerns about the manner in which the SABC has handled the firearms registry, and we will continue to monitor the turnaround plan which has been put in place. The committee further noted that there are people who simply wanted to reapply for renewal of their firearms licenses, and that this needed to be considered. However, we show support to the SABC in making sure that our streets are safer and that they are free of firearms and continue to kill children of Nyanga, other areas in the Cape Flats, Jeppe and Alexandria in Gauteng, and in Nanda and Umlazi in KwaZulu-Natal. We have all the confidence that this amnesty process will allow all firearm owners who no longer want to have their firearms to hand it in for destruction. We also call on all those illegal firearm owners and members of the public who know of illegal firearm owners to come forward and encourage them to hand it in. Honorable Chairperson and honorable members, honorable ministers, let us all do our bit to make South Africa a safer place. The South African public expects no less. Chairperson, the Portfolio Committee is of the view that we need this firearm amnesty to help us bring violent crime to order. We support the firearms amnesty and we encourage this House to do so. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. May I now recognize the Chief Whip of the Majority Party?
Thank you very much, House Chair. House Chair, I move that the report be adopted. Thank you.
Thank you. The motion is that the report be adopted. Are there any objections?
Chairperson, the DA would like to make a declaration.
The declaration has been requested. Yes, the DA.
Honourable House Chairperson, this notice to declare a firearm amnesty will not deter criminals from killing innocent people, and it will not reduce gun-related murders in South Africa. The Minister will have us believe that that is the case, but I want to assure this House that it is not. And the reason for that is that the South African Police Service has failed to prove that any firearm collected in previous amnesties can be linked to the commission of a crime. What the South African Police Service has, however, been able to prove is its negligence in looking after its very own firearms. More than 600 SAPS firearms were lost or stolen in the 2017-18 financial year, yet the Minister wants SAPS to collect firearms from lawful South African citizens in order for them to then renew their licenses while the South African Police Service looks after those firearms. The DA has asked a number of important and critical questions which have simply gone unanswered, and we are concerned that the ANC seems intent on bulldozing this amnesty through Parliament without the committee actually being satisfied whether A, SAPS can handle the intake of the approximately 450,000 firearms, B, SAPS can actually safeguard the firearms that have been handed in pending renewal of a license, C, that the Central Firearm Registry can handle the influx of license renewals that may arise, and D, whether the committee was in fact satisfied that the notice served before the committee was in fact valid. The date of commencement of that amnesty and that notice was the 1st of October, and the committee had to amend the notice in the meeting. The ANC was previously opposed to the amnesty, and we all were unanimous in sending the South African Police Service back. We sent them back as a committee. In the next meeting, before the committee had been satisfied of any of the above points, the ANC simply approved the amnesty. None of the concerns raised by the committee in the 5th Parliament seem to have been satisfied by SAPS, and while the Minister believes that this will help in the fight against crime, he simply cannot prove it. There is an interim order against SAPS in this regard, in regard to firearm ownership, and I want to read an extract from the judgment. It reads as follows: that the South African Police Service is prohibited from demanding that such firearms be handed over to it for the sole reason that the license of such a firearm has expired. While SAPS intends to appeal this interim order, the committee has acted irresponsibly by not allowing that process to conclude before approving the amnesty. Should this amnesty be approved today, the National Police Commissioner must ensure that the interim order
welcomes the sustained moderation in inflation outcomes and inflation expectations, and would like to see inflation expectations anchored closer to the midpoint of the inflation target range on a sustained basis. Against this backdrop, the MPC decided to keep the repurchase rate unchanged at 6.5% per annum. 3 members preferred to keep interest rates on hold, and 2 members preferred a cut of 25 basis points. Monetary policy actions will continue to focus on anchoring inflation expectations near the midpoint of the inflation target range in the interests of balanced and sustainable growth. In this persistently uncertain environment, future policy decisions will continue to be highly data dependent, sensitive to the balance of risks to the outlook, and will seek to look through temporary price shocks. The implied path of policy rates over the forecast period, generated by the quarterly projection model, indicated 1 repo cut of 25 basis points in the 3rd quarter of 2020. This remains a broad policy guide which could change in either direction from meeting to meeting in response to new developments and changing data and risks. That concludes our statement, and we at this stage would like to take any questions that you might have, and the panel here would deal with your questions. You will also find attached at the back of the statement the dates for the MPC meetings for 2020. Who are the early takers? Yes, sir.
Good day, Governor and the panel. I'm Mfoneko from Reuters News. I wanted to ask, was the upcoming February budget a consideration in terms of timing of the decision? Second question is, how much of a consideration was the fact that other emerging market banks have been cutting rates and perhaps cutting them aggressively? And that obviously has an impact on the attractiveness of the yield offered by South African assets. How much of that was a consideration in your discussions? Thanks.
Any other? Yes, ma'am.
Governor, it's Pranesha from Bloomberg. Also just want to get some insight into your discussions. The MTBPS showed a rapid deterioration in the fiscal outlook, and we're also a step closer to a full house of junk ratings, with Moody's having changed the outlook. How did that factor into your discussions?
Yes, sir.
Good day, Governor. Lucanio from Business Day. Governor, seeing that the inflation outlook this year was so much lower than what we were predicting this time last year, how concerned are you that policy today might be based on forecasts that might turn out to be wildly maybe pessimistic, maybe like we might have more room than you maybe you think?
Yes, ma'am.
Governor Hilary Joffe from Business Times. You continue to emphasize that you are guided by trying to get inflation expectations down to the midpoint of 4.5%. So 2 questions. The first is, are you convinced that expectations are a major factor in shaping inflation, the inflation outlook? Is there a sort of a direct correlation? And the second is, have you considered asking the Treasury or the Finance Minister to change the range to a point target of 4.5% to clarify what some would say already is the target?
Thank you very much. But still, Mfuneko, your question is also related to what Pranesha had raised in terms of the budget and in terms of the MTBPS. We don't know what is in the February budget, so there was no way in which we could factor it into the decision today or factor it into future decisions. We do not know what is in that budget. But Pranesha asked the impact of the MTBPS, and very clearly the fact that the rating agencies had reacted in the manner that they had reacted suggests that they have concerns about the MTBPS. If the rating agencies have a concern, those will then begin to factor into the country risk premium. And the manner in which we end up having to decide what the neutral rate is for South Africa is that we take what the foreign neutral is and we adjust it for South Africa's specific country risk. And clearly, if the South African country risk rises, then what you have is that neutral rate is then deemed to be higher. And if it is deemed to be higher, that suggests that where you are sitting in terms of the ruling stance, it could suggest that you are more accommodative without becoming accommodative yourself. It's purely a shift in the country risk premium. Put simply, if this country is to bring down the long-term cost of capital, we have got to bring down the country risk premium. And we have got a history with that. We know when we were in a good space and country risk premium was low, the cost of capital in this country was always lower. Was Moody's a consideration? As we had said, it's what all the agencies had to say and what that could fit into the country risk premium that will fit itself into the neutral rate. Was it a factor that other emerging market banks are cutting, and thus it changes the relative rates between us and those countries? We always look at what is happening in South Africa's major trading partners. But what fits into our neutral real rate in the main would be the neutral rates of the G3 economies, being the US, the Euro area, and Japan, for example. But even when those central banks move their policy rates, we do not try and match them basis point for basis point. What we do is to analyze developments in the South African economy and what the changes in policies in those other countries mean for capital flows in South Africa, and by extension what it could mean for the exchange rate. And we then have to take a view as to whether that is a once-off move, and if it is a once-off move, we see through it. And if it is not a once-off move, and it ends up fitting itself into domestic price formation process, then policy has got to react to that. And it could be that the shock is good for inflation, meaning it brings inflation lower, or it could be that it is adverse for inflation, meaning it raises inflation. That is how the transmission from developments elsewhere in the world get taken into account in our deliberations. And of course, we look at inflation, because that's what says it. But it also has an impact on competitiveness, and that by extension also have an impact on growth. And we have got to take account of those. Why do we have to take account of growth? We've got to take account of growth because our responsibility, our mandate is in the interest of balanced and sustainable growth. That's one. And secondly, is that the output gap is a very important input into the domestic price formulation. And for us to know what the output gap is, we have got to know potential, and we have got to know what we expect growth to be in the future, because you do not determine policy on the basis of today's indicators, but on what indicators are likely to evolve into in the future. Simply put, what would be the outlook for both growth and for inflation? Lucanio, inflation surprised on the downside this year. In the monetary policy review earlier in the year, we did a study and a comparison of what our forecast was at a particular point in time and what the ultimate outcome was. We compared ourselves to all the other forecasters in the economy. The bad news is that we were all wrong on the forecast relative to the outcomes. The good news are we were less wrong than the others. We took it further and we said, what happens with other central banks? And we compared our forecast relative to the outcomes and say, what is the deviation? And what has been the experience of other countries? And we were within range. So, let's get things clear. The reason we keep on emphasizing data dependency is because as data evolves, it changes your outlook, and by extension also changes what you are going to do. And if you make the wrong call, you might find yourself that with hindsight, you say, oh, I could have done something else. But as we know in life, hindsight is perfect. You can never get things wrong with hindsight. So when there had been a deviation, we then try and go back and say, what caused the deviation? And by a big measure, it had been food prices, which kept on surprising on the downside. There had been other factors like owner equivalent rent and so forth, but by a big measure, it had to do with food prices. Hillary, inflation expectations and whether we are convinced as to whether they are shaping the inflation outcome. There is no doubt that they do. The academic literature and the evidence is compelling that there is a very strong relationship between expectations and inflation outcomes. There is a caveat, and the caveat is you have got to take a view about whether the inflation expectation formation is rational and forward-looking or whether it is adaptive. If inflation expectation formation process is forward-looking and rational, what it would mean is that the price setters in the economy look at what future inflation is going to be, and based on what they think future inflation is going to be, they set their prices accordingly, whether they are labor market participants or product market participants. And in that process, monetary policy also becomes fairly easy because it's just so straightforward. All agents look at it this way, and put simply, we then talk of the anchoring of expectations going forward. But that anchoring could be an anchoring around what the central bank wants, or it could be higher than what the central bank wants. It could even be lower. That is not a big problem from a policy perspective. You can deal with that. The problem from a policy perspective becomes when they are de-anchored and they are all over, because then that makes the policy decision process complex. The expectations formation process could also be adaptive, which means that economic agents set their prices based on what the most recent inflation rate is. And if that is the case, if inflation is going up and the price setters are adaptive or backward-looking, then you are going to see a spiral in prices, because as the price outcome is published and they see that it is higher, they then adapt to that and they go even higher. If it is that it is adaptive and inflation is going lower, that could be beneficial, because that would mean that they look at the most recent inflation outcome, and the lower it comes, the more they set their prices lower. In South Africa, the jury is still out as to whether it is forward-looking or backward-looking. And in the quarterly projection model, what we do is that we give an equal weighting to backward-looking expectations and forward-looking expectations. And we blend that, and on the basis of that, we generate expectations in terms of the quarterly projection model. Would we consider approaching the National Treasury to change the target from a range to a point. And I like the fact that you said approach, because it's got to be an iterative process between the two institutions. Since the target range was set, many countries around the world have revised their inflation targets. None of them revised it higher. They all revised their targets lower. It is also true that our range is wider than that of other inflation targeters and might even be on the higher end of our peer countries. Most countries use a point, but there isn't evidence that suggests that a point is better than a range. And in any case, many countries that have a point that will say it's 4.5%, that is our point, plus minus 1.5%. So if South Africa was to have a point of 4.5 plus minus 1.5%, it will be 3 to 6. It amounts to the same thing, but the point does get people focused because they say that is where they want it to be. We haven't thought of having to approach the Treasury to change to a point as opposed to a range. What the range has done for us is that it has given us the flexibility within the range. We were able to aim for the 4.5 within the target range of 3 to 6. And we are actually pleased that increasingly the analysts and the price setters are starting to talk about that midpoint of 4.5%. And if it is sustained, it will be a welcome development that could actually give a respite to the price formation process in this country. Any others? Amahela.
Good afternoon, Governor. I'm Bata from Bloomberg News. Governor, we've just seen the SAA workers going on strike, demanding an 8% wage increase. We were told that SAA management then came back onto the negotiating table, possibly offering 6.5%, which was later withdrawn. The question I have is the MPC at all concerned about the wage negotiations that are well above inflation, impacting the inflation outlook, particularly when we see those coming out of state-owned entities?
Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Foneko from Reuters again. How concerned are you about the lack of demand in the economy? And do you not see a role for the central bank to use rates to perhaps deliver a stimulus to demand and consumer spending, even if it is temporary? And a second question is, did the MPC consider the sensitivity of government's debt portfolio to interest rates? Is that something that was discussed in the meeting?
Is that it? Lucanio?
Governor, sorry, if I may just follow up on Hillary's question. Do you think it might be time